population is going to be suffering from water stress. And water stress, as I've been telling you, has been rising in this past decade. And then this is caused by climate change, and average temperature is increasing, and rivers are drying up. So why is this bad? And why is this going to be worse in 100 years? So 4 reasons. 1, people are going to die of thirst and starvation. We're not going to have enough water, fresh water to drink. Although seawater may become, there may be more seawater, fresh water is going to decrease. And also, people are going to starve. We already have a huge problem about world hunger, but people are going to starve because without water, we cannot do agriculture, we cannot make food for people, and that is why people are going to starve. And also, too, the agricultural sector is going to weaken. Farmers are going to become poor because there are many people in the agricultural industry that rely on agriculture to sustain their lives. However, these people are going to be deprived of that because they do not have the water to be able to do these agricultural works, and then farmers will become poor, their families will become poor, they won't be able to afford any education, they won't be able to afford any food, and that is why it is bad for the majority of the people. And third, there's going to be more conflict over water. And I will talk about that later, but before that, fourth, there's going to be lots of movement of people because there simply isn't going to be any water left. So people, especially in Africa and the Middle East, where there's already a lack of water, people are going to be moving, there are going to be more immigrants, and all countries, this is not just developing countries, but developed countries are also an actor in this motion. So what's going to happen? There's going to be a lack of education. As I said, people are not going to have any money. There are going to be more immigrants. These people are all not going to be able to receive an education because they do not have the money or the capacity to do so. There are going to be more immigrants. And people are going to lose jobs in developed countries as well because these immigrants are going to take these jobs. And also third, poverty and world hunger will increase. So now going back to conflict over water. In 1970s, there were only 25 conflicts over water, but in 2010, there's been 466 conflicts over water, and this trend is still increasing as of today. So if we take the Mekong River, for example, if water stress still becomes, because climate change will keep on becoming more severe, having a more severe impact, if there's a drought, then China is able to stop water at the upper end of the river, and then the countries and the lower end of the river in East Asia will not be able to receive that water. South Asia will not be able to receive that water, and therefore there will be conflict because these countries will revolt against China. And that can be said also on the Indus River, like Pakistan and India, they both have nuclear weapons, and if a drought happens and if there is conflict, they will. It is inevitable that they might use these weapons to create a world war. And also talking about sea levels rising, Venice is a place of cultural heritage, but this city, or all of what it holds, is going to be lost if sea levels rise. And Mexico City is the capital of Mexico. However, all of these people are going to die. They're going to be driven out of their homes because of sea levels rising. And then where are they going to go? They're going to try and go to the U.S., but the U.S. are not going to let them in. And we can just see a bad spiral of people suffering because of climate change. And there's going to be a bigger population, but less land space because of sea levels rising. And people are going to suffer from climate change. And that is why we are so proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for opening the debate, and call upon Leader of Opposition to continue the debate. Hear, hear.
although Cold War happened, World War III was stoppable. Although people died like so many years ago, people are not dying because of famine and the status quo. We believe that in our world, 100 years later, we will have a world in which the world is controllable by people, the situation is controllable by people because of technological advancements and the learnings of people, how people see. That is why we're very proud to oppose their plan. So, well, let me, before moving on to my arguments, let me first, rebut to what the government side was saying. So basically, what they have brought to us was that climate change will happen. Well, mainly three rebuttals to this. Firstly, their whole case assumes on the point that needs will rise in the future. That is to say, the population will rise in the future, the people will rise in the future. Because if that was not true, their case will fail in the first place. Like, look, they talk about droughts and things like that. But if there was less population, there's less needs for those resources, right? So their case fails if we were able to prove that there will be no more needs in the future. So why is there no more needs in the future, right? We think this is true. Well, looking at the status quo, many population in the advanced countries are decreasing, right? We think that because of this, in the future, if many people earns a lot of money, and if there were less children, their whole case will not stand in the first place because there will be less people, right? Less people in need of natural resources, less people in need of war, less people in need of immigrating, right? And look, they also talked about immigrants, right? For example. They crushed their whole point by saying this because by immigrating to, for example, developed countries, those countries which were used to be suffering from droughts will be fertilized, right? Because there's no more person living in there. There is resources found in the future because people will not be living there, right? Trees will grow, water will be sufficient, but look, there's no problem. Secondly, we think that their point stands on the premise that humans will not find any ways in the future to solve these kinds of problems. No, we will not say it. We think that humans will find a solution, right? Why? Because A, they have a much more incentive, right? Once they notice that, okay, climate change is a very big problem. For example, in the status quo, already Ms. Greta is saying these kind of things, right? And in the near future, more people will claim these things, and therefore we think that their point has is not true in the first place. But secondly, because they have the capacity to do so, right? As I will tell you later, more technological advancements will enable these people to fight back more against climate change. Well, as for for example, they said CO2, for example, right? Well, I think humans will have a capacity to dissolve it into different substances, right? And therefore, we already have this kind of technology in the status quo, but in the near future, it will be more applicable, right? Therefore, we are very proud to say that their point is false. Yes, I'll take it.
So, by trying to say that by 2030 we have to cut down half our carbon emissions, do you think that is possible, given that the time, and also do you think that is possible through people just standing up and saying that?
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so maybe, okay, in the 2030, it will not be possible, right? But what we're not talking about is what we're talking about is 100 years later, not now, right? We think that they're not in the near future, 10 years later, right? Even if they're carbon emissions are not, these goals will not be substantiated. Well, first of all, the claim of the sustainable development goals might not be a very provable. Correct claim in the first place, because they're just agitating people to make the situation better. It does not mean that the situation will be irreversible after 2030, right? They said even if their point will be true, we believe that technological advancements will lead to things like finding another planet, right? Finding another way of energy sources. For example, finding, as I will tell you later. So therefore, their point does not stand. But let me talk about our point now. We believe that because of better technology, we will, humanity will be able to have a better planet. So what is happening in the status quo, first of all? We think that there is no capacity to solve many problems such as war, famine, and disease. As for diseases, there's no instant vaccination, for example, right? Well, which may be system might be implemented in the future, 100 years later. But secondly, we think that there is there's limited energy resources because of famine, right? Their claim might be, okay, energy will be limited, like, forever. But we say that there's a lot of energy in outer space, right? Like, for example, like, another star, right? Thirdly, like, for war, there's no political system or checking system from in the entire world that checks the politics. That's why, like, war happens in the first place, right? Note that all of these problems exist in any regions of this world, any regions of this, Earth. But what is the counterfactual? What is the 100 years later? We think that situation will improve because of 3 reasons. Firstly, the incentive of people, right? We think, okay, yes, we will take different. We think that the situation will become worse, like in 10 years, a bit later. At that point, people will notice that the situation is so serious, right? We have which is already happening right now. People notice that droughts are happening, trees are being cut, and like the situation becoming worse. Well, that is why people will try very hard to find things like power plants, right? Which is already happening now. For example, power plants with nuclear infusion, or like maybe in the future, 100 years later, they might find a way to collect energy from like fixed star forms or some other than the sun, right? Secondly, they have the capacity to do so. As I said before, more development will lead to solving these kind of disease and famine, because probably we can infer easily that there will be a better vaccination, which will be more efficiently made, right? Thirdly, okay, so we think that humans will not use these technology in a bad way, because we think that at least issues that are happening around the globe will be solved, right? Even if there was a political difference between U.S. and China, for example, we think that if they agree, they all agree on the fact that environment is being severely damaged in the status quo, right? We think, for example, if they were able to agree on if there was a problem happening around the globe, it will be solved, right? For these reasons, we're very proud to propose today. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition and call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case for side proposition.
The most important consideration today is the quality of life for the majority of people, the sustainable environment. I would like to start off with some rebuttals. They have talked about how there will be less people in the future because developed countries are decreasing the number of people. However, that's not true, because there are developing countries that are more increasing in a bigger number than those decreasing people in developed countries. For example, like India, there will be a bigger population in the future, meaning that their rebuttal doesn't stand. Also, they have agreed that by 2030, mitigation will be happening for the environment. And it is easy for the opposition to say everything the technology will be better by 100 years. But is that really true? Because look at how things are not changing anything. It's not that easy for people to change the environment so drastically. Is there a way no thank you about changing the future? I would like to start off. I would like to now extend our cases. I'll talk about societal impact. In the status quo, Russia's invasion to Ukraine doesn't seem to have an ending. This is probably likely to end up as a World War III. Why do I think so? 3 reasons. 1, the international relations are dividing up. 2, China's relationship with other countries are crazy. 3, resemblance of World War I and World War II. 1, international division. Russia versus Ukraine. This war has been continuing for so long. Russia wouldn't and doesn't seem to have the word giving up in his mind, right?
Ukraine, on the other hand, is getting so much aid from US, EU, and Japan. The economic sanctions are really working. Russia has China and African countries who still trade with them. The ending can be seen, right? Russia and their trading, so it will be a state of division for like Russia and their trading countries versus NATO and Japan, for example. Second, China's relation. Taiwan. China is claiming Taiwan to be theirs, and it's no wonder that any time they would attack Taiwan, just like Russia did to Ukraine, right? As technology hires, more demand will be there for Taiwan because TMSC is such a big company. Why wouldn't China want it, right? So there will be like more chances of China attacking Taiwan. About Middle East. China is becoming a middle ground country for some Middle Eastern countries instead of US. They're supporting them instead of the US that left them, right? This will incentivize Middle East countries to be more favorable of China than US, meaning that there will be a division of Middle East and more division of Middle East and US, meaning that China will have Middle East with
Point of information.
No, thank you. China versus US. US regards China as the biggest threat to their economy and technology growth. China and Russia also divide on the Taiwan problem, and their relationship is definitely not good. I would like to talk about three resemblance of World War I and World War II. Why did World War I happen? Because of division of the countries like Germany and Italy versus France and England. The splitting countries have made two different teams that led to war, right? The status quo looks so like the beginning of World War I. Like I have stated previously, many countries are conflicting each other. And the way, yes.
Doesn't that just prove that your status quo is just like so bad in the first place?
No, it is not, because we're just saying that it looks like the state that it was before war. It's not like saying we're in the middle of World War III. I'm saying that in the status quo it's okay, but in like 100 years later, if this happens, people will be like have to live a world after war. Like what happened to when it was after World War II? There was like Cold War, right? People will be in such a messed up place. Well, like I will talk about that later, right? So this world will be divided into two, right? Meaning that there will be two like major teams, like Russia, China, Middle East team versus NATO with US, Japan team. This will become a world war that will involve the whole world. What does it look like the World War II? World War II occurred of countries having block economy and keeping their economy safe and protecting their companies by not having so much trading. In the status quo, the US is being very careful with their economy, cutting out other companies from abroad, trying to protect its economy. Many countries are sanctioning Russia and not having trade, right? Making Russia in a solitary state. Many pieces of creating war are being filled in right now, and this will be continuing for decades, splitting the world completely into two. This will have a huge effect on life 100 years later. Why? Because one, nuclear weapons could be used. Both countries, US, Russia, and own nuclear weapons. The war happens, either side will be losing or winning, right? Simple agreement will not happen unless one side gives up, which is not going to happen because it's such a big war between the US and Russia, like that's a big country. They wouldn't want to give up saying like, well, we're gonna lose, right? The losing side will be incentivized to use nuclear weapons first and destroy the other side before they get destroyed. Because why not destroy the other side if you're gonna be destroyed, right? It's better for you to survive than you being destroyed. If they were used, well, I don't really need to explain this much, but it will be like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world is lost, everything is lost, everything is destroyed. Two, even if not used, food loss will happen because Ukraine is like a big food provider, right? We will be completely lost by the war going on there. For example, like the war, the corpse of the soldier will change the soil forever. For example, like there will be like poppies growing there except for wheat. So like the wheat production wouldn't be happening, and because the war is happening globally, all the supply chains would be completely destroyed, meaning that this proposed this motion.
I thank the second speaker from government and call on the second speaker from opposition to continue the case for their side of the House. Hear, hear.
speaker, we simply say that their side's issue does not stand because they only gave us examples, and when they did actually give us logic, they only gave us faulty ones that were very skipping in explanation. And that is why we're so proud to propose today, right? So in my speech today, I would like to ask 3 questions. First of all, will the problems they talked about still exist 100 years later? Second of all, will innovation happen or not? Third of all, will the quality of life increase as they said, right? Okay, so now moving on to the first point about whether these issues will still exist, right? So their side's issue was basically based around the premise that these first of all, that the population will keep on increasing, and then second of all, that these issues that they've talked about will still be such a big of a problem in the future, right? So, well, what I would like to say that first of all about their point about the population increasing, this is not going to be a sustained growth at least 100 years later, right? This is because, for example, when you look at the world, there are many countries in which the population is decreasing, right? For example, Japan is a prime example of this, and also China, right? It was once called the place that it was like basically this a place that's like continuously generating a huge amount of population, despite already having a huge population in the past. But this is no longer the case, especially when we consider the fact that the population has gone into decline, right? We simply cannot say how this logic will not apply for other countries, right? For example, India in the near future, right? And also other countries such as Nigeria as well, right? So therefore, we are saying that their analysis that these problems will still continue to exist on into the future is simply faulty, right? Second of all, about their point about water problems and such things like that, right? But we simply say that there will be more technologies that are basically made in order to prevent or at least mitigate the effects of these points, right? I'll explain more about this on my second question, but we simply say that these problems will not be so much bigger of a problem in the future, like they say, right? Now moving on to the second question, whether innovation will occur. So what has the government side said? Well, they say that we can't just find these technologies, and then that it's not going to be close enough or something like that, right? However, as for the first point, we simply say that they've offered us no reasoning to why this will not happen, right? We have already clearly stated that there will be incentives for these incentives for all countries and all corporations and all researchers in the world in the future to research such things, because this is such an urgent problem, right? Especially because of the fact that the citizens of each nation will be more intent on actually solving this problem and will actually ask the government to do so, right? Whether it be through voting or through protesting, that is not a very important issue, right? Also, we also say that such technological developments are already occurring, right? For example, there already are innovations, for example, of trapping the CO2 in the air into the ground, right? And for example, there are also new methods of nuclear fusion being researched in order to provide more electricity. The present nuclear power plants, no thank you, are already improving, for example, as well, no thank you. And I also say that we simply say that therefore the problems that they talked about, for example, there not being energy or things will not be true, and that there will be technological development, right? This is further reinforced by the fact that, as they've said, well, this can be proven from society, right? And okay, so let's just say that environmental problems were not solved, right? However, we still cannot see how, for example, space exploration will not happen, right? And they've also offered us no engagement on our analysis about, for example, how famine will decrease and how diseases will decrease, right? And we think that we've clearly shown that for the entirety of humanity, right? And that is why we're saying that the quality of life will also increase, right? I mean, for everyday life, not in times of conflict, right? Okay, and so that is why we are saying that this innovation will occur, and basically what they've said is not going to happen, right? Simply because their point stands on the premise that innovation will not occur, and we have basically refuted that this will happen. Okay, finally, whether quality of life will decrease or not, right? So government's point was basically that World War III will happen, right? And that it'll be like a kind of Russia and China conflict versus Western nations. However, we simply think that this point is very false, right? First of all, they simply could not explain why war will actually occur, right? They say it's similar to World War I or World War II, right? Sure, this may be true, but at the same time, I think this also applies for the time that the Cold War actually happened, right? Or when actually World War III didn't happen and turned into the Cold War, right? We simply cannot see how their analysis of how conflict will actually occur is true, right? And that is why we're saying that the point does not stand. Even if war did break out, and even if there were some conflicts, we say that it's highly unlikely that it will be direct conflicts, right? Because we simply say that nuclear deterrence is strong enough to at least not incentivize countries to fight each other directly. For example, it's strong enough to disincentivize Russia to wage war on US directly, simply because both countries understand that it will be very bad for their reputation and for their population, and for basically the rest of humanity as well, right? And therefore, we say that this direct conflict will not happen, and that rather things like the Korean War will happen. And we simply say that such big impacts that they've talked about at least will never occur, right? Okay, and moreover, even when we consider these conflicts, we simply say that there's really no delta from the status quo, simply because these conflicts are already happening, and in fact, we say that these countries will also be disincentivized to actually hurt each other, simply because they are already on scarce resources, right? They cannot afford war, and nor can their opponents. We simply say that this is the logic why war will simply not happen. Also, they talked about there will be an incentive for every country to basically launch nukes at each other, especially if they're losing. However, we simply say that this mechanism is ridiculous, right? Because no country actually wants others to think of them as a rational country. Even if they are losing, they still need international support. And we simply say that these countries would want international support even if they do have nuclear arms, because just having nuclear arms would equal out the playing field, not change it or not reverse it, right? And that is why we're saying that suddenly becoming like the death angel of Earth by launching a nuke is a very unlikely mechanism to actually occur, right? Finally, they say that there will be poppies planted everywhere, and that suddenly Ukraine will just become a place of poppies and not of wheat, right? However, we simply say that this is ridiculous, right? Such memorials exist only for the purpose of for example, making sure that people remember the war. Second, they are made to memorize individual battles, not like the war entirely, right? And we say that these memorials, well, if it's so damaging and if it's so big of an extent, well, people will not just build them anymore, simply because they will think that they will already have enough things in order to actually remember these conflicts and in order to actually teach the lesson to a further generation, right? And moreover, even if conflicts do actually occur, we simply cannot see how this will be inside the 100-year span, or how the impacts will actually be felt inside the 100-year span, right? For example, if it occurs tomorrow and ends like 1 year later, well, from here on, Earth and humanity might rebuild itself. And note that after conflict comes this period of relative peace, where international cooperation actually happens, right? For example, right after the World War II, the United Nations was made, right? We simply cannot see how 100 years from now the same situation might not occur, right? And that is why we are so proud to oppose.
I thank the second speaker from the opposition and call upon the government whip to continue the case for their side of the house. Hear, hear.
problems we have now. No, this is not true. We take a step into our world, where there's also developing countries, also nations that don't have enough capital, don't have enough voices, don't have enough reputation to even change their status quo in the first place. Take a step into our world. So first, we have to ask them, can this be true when they say, oh, people will talk, oh, there'll be more technology, there'll be more advancement. First of all, there's no mechanism to how technology will actually be able to change these people's lives. And two, can this be true? Because technology basically is made for developed countries, developed people with capital. People who are in need right now cannot be harmed, cannot be changed. And in 100 years, these people won't even be able to exist because the status quo is
developed nations people. Now 2, who gets saved in this motion? Who gets more saved more in this motion, right now or in the future? And I will be answering this later. So now, a few rebuttals, and mainly rebuttals to the opposition side. So they said there will be a decrease in population. First, this is completely not true, because right now in the status quo, there are so many people in developing countries actually reproducing more because they need more capital, they need more workforce, because obviously inflation, they don't have enough money. So there's obviously right now so many more people in the world, more increasing population. Their point is completely true. And also, we're in a capitalist world, so whatever they say is just not true. 2, we said that there'll be more immigrants because of climate change making, people not be able to live. Opposition said to this, well, the land will be fertilized. Well, first of all, this does not directly engage with the fact that there will be immigrants. And B, fertilizing land takes time. And in 100 years, it will be too late for these immigrants, so-called immigrants, to actually go back to their country. They won't even be existing because they just will be able to survive. Look at the truth. Hang on. Climate change isn't going to magically stop, even if people left. Climate change is still going to worsen. Yes.
Okay, let's take it frame to the maximum and say that these people, like the oppressed people and the people who are poor, will be exterminated. Why? Is there any people who are being in like such harm 100 years later?
Yes, because the climate change is obviously going to change. It's obviously going to impact these people's lives, and also maybe there won't be in 100 years because they won't even be able to survive. Is that a good world for you? For that developing people won't be able to survive? I don't think so. 3, the opposition said technological advancement will be, a good way to solve all these problems. Well, first of all, this is completely based on hope. Okay? They'll say we'll be able to find a new planet magically. Well, what is the probability of this? It's going to take so much time to develop, to actually be safe and to actually develop a safe and efficient way for the whole world to be saved. We're talking about a whole world, people, not just like developed nations. And this won't, even if it might happen maybe in like 200 years, it definitely won't be able to happen in 100 years because we're not up to that point. Next, the opposition said there won't be any like the status quo in the status quo. We don't have political systems, and if everything gets worse, people start to talk and they'll find solutions. People will talk, but you know what? We're not talking about these merit-based political systems. We're not talking about war based on merit. We're talking about war based on survival. With necessity. Motoko, our first speaker, has given you real examples of climate change happening now. Statistics of the sea levels rising. There will be no water, there will be no food for these people, right? So what do people do when they're in need, when they're desperate? They obviously fight. It's been happening since the beginning of humanity. We cannot find a solution. We cannot do it when we're desperate. Their point does not stand. And also they said incentives for people will be more efficient. Are they really saying that just by Greta standing up and saying, oh, climate change is happening, we have to do something? And do you really think that governments will actually listen? Yeah, sure, maybe there'll be more riots in the future. But however, we live in a capitalist society. The people who have money rule our world. The people who have money makes the current rules actually basically is the base of what we have right now. These people are actually based on money. These people want money, and these people want, capital for themselves. Even if people speak out and say whatever they have, capitalists, these people who have money, won't really care. We can see it right now because they're all about merit. They're all about money. Their point does not stand because maybe, some people's incentives might be higher, but the reality is that we live in a capitalist society. know what? It's actually going to get worse in 100 years. Are governments likely to help this situation? Maybe a little, but we're in a kind of a profit-based world. We see how the MDGs didn't work. We see how companies are only using SDGs because just for the popularity. There's actually so many lies in this thing, and we actually still see a rise in CO2, the amount of CO2 emitted by these companies and capitalists. We see that in a real life example, it does not work. The thing is, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and opposition is only about hope. We hope that innovation is going to help. We hope that everything is going to be better. But the reality is that it won't be. People will suffer. Team government does not stand for this. We like the world we live in now. We are proud to come from Spain.
I thank the government whip and call upon the opposition whip to continue the debate. Hear, hear.
Speaker, but mainly 3 points their side has lost this debate. Firstly, they were thinking that this humanity will not really develop after knowing this fact that it won't really the condition won't really be really better within 100 years. And then secondly, they were thinking on a short basis, not the 100 years. So, for example, their example which they gave us and gave to you was all about those terms from like 10 to 30 years. We believe that it's not really an example within these 100 years, and we believe that it is completely irrelevant throughout this motion. And then 3, they failed to show how their problem will still exist under 100 years. So, separating into 2 parts throughout this debate, throughout my speech. So firstly, rebutting mainly on the first point about these environment worsening, and then secondly, talking about these social impacts, if it's really relevant to this debate. So now moving on, about these environmental worsening. So firstly, on their point, their speeches was mainly most on the worst case scenario, and also on 1-point analysis or 1-point scenario when these humans were not really developing anything because they were too, because they found out that really they do not have the opportunity to get out of these problems. But we believe that there are no really points showing that these humans won't tackle these problems. So, moving on, they said that the rise of technology is not really possible here, but why say we cannot really develop these technologies? So firstly, we believe that they gave us no proof about that. They think that that's not really needed here. And then, so secondly, we believe that these peoples, humans or nations, has the incentive to develop since they still want to tackle these problems as much as they could. So why are they speaking on the basis that lots of people are going to lay their hands out and do nothing but wait for humans to be extinct? They gave us no points about that. Now, also, we believe that still we have the capacity until the resources get extinct. If we talk on the basis of their points here. So now, moving on. So they gave us about these water suffering or like those points. So firstly, why not really research on seawater or uses of drinking on this point? We believe that there's still these big incentives for nations to do so until the possibility of making seawater into a drinkable water gets to 0%. We believe that still these humans still need to move and develop. And yes.
If we are in a state of crisis right now, why do you think that people will start acting in 10 years' time?
What do you mean by that?
So like, we are in a climate crisis, we are in a crisis right now. Why do you think that people will magically decide to do something or
So on that point, we believe that, say, again, we agree on the point that lots of people are suffering from these environmental crises. So lots of people share these problems. So lots of people share these problems, all of these problems which is occurring around the world, and facing fear from these points. So we believe that from all these fears, again, humans can still stand up and try to develop these technologies which might in future be a solution to these problems. And we believe that there were no really good engagements from their side here. Now moving on, they said that there will be conflicts happening against these resources. So firstly, we believe that there's no really incentive for these nations to fight. We believe that it is more likely for these countries to unite and go over these problems before having a crisis, because having a crisis here means that these humans will be naturally extinct, erasing all those resources left behind, which might be able to use to gain more technology, which can be a solution in the near future. So we believe that there's no incentive for nations to fight. And also our second speaker said that there's no really enough capacity for these nations to fight too. So also they said that there will be lack of education on their point, but we believe that there's not true. Again, there's more incentive for these governments or nations around the world to raise these researchers to tackle the problem. So we believe that by growing lots of researchers, there might be some kind, in millions of people or millions of researchers, there might be some single solution to one of these problems which is making us really suffer right now. And we believe that there would be more incentive here. And then on their point about this climate change, we believe that their side was not really able to state the problem. Why cannot really solve this problem? Now moving on to their point about the social impact. So again, we believe that their side is not really thinking in a 100-year basis. We believe that these wars throughout the history have only affected on short term, which is like 20 or 50 years, not really 100 years. And secondly, we believe that this debate is not really about these countries' power changing over war and war occurring. So we believe that it's not. So we do not really care which country is holding power. We are only talking about these, people's basic lives will get advanced due to technologies or like those things such as medical or daily technology. So for example, look back at these 100 years. There have been more medications or more technologies available for people, such as smartphones and also medications for cancers, which haven't really existed in the past 100 years. So we believe that there will still be a developing happening here. And then thirdly, about on these wars and conflicts may happen, but we believe that it might impact each human's lives here. But we believe that it does not really impact the entire flow of the humanity. So what I mean here is that one, humans have recreated and developed more further than before after each crisis throughout the history. And then secondly, furthermore, the war helped these advanced technologies, for example, like such as nutrition, a logic of nutrition. This was born throughout these wars to help make these soldiers to fight for more. And this idea of nutrition have helped these humanity for a long time. And then on this point about wars, they gave us examples of Hiroshima. But we believe that it only supports our point, since after 70 years of nuclear bombing, we are proud to say that Hiroshima has developed more than before. So if we take the max on their point about this World War III, we believe that the nations around the world will globally reunite to help develop. As for example, Japan and the US. Since people are tired of war, tired of losing loved ones, and tired of hunger, and also tired of suffering from war. And also, the winning country has the incentive to do so to help these people, since they are also tired of doing more war, and also they want to stop these wars from happening from these wars. So from all these points, we are proud to say that their point does not really stand at all, and we have won this debate. Thank you.
I thank the opposition whip and call upon the opposition of 5 speakers to pose the case for their side of the House.
Is it 5 minutes?
No, 4 minutes. 4.
speaker, we simply want to state that, as our whip speaker said, their side have never shown us why their examples, why their points, and why the problems that they mentioned will still exist 100 years from now, and why it will be such a unique problem to what will happen 100 years from now. And that is why we are so proud to oppose today. Okay, so now I would like to first ask two questions, compare our stances, and then finally give one conclusion. So first of all, the first question is, will technology develop or not, right? So the government side has basically said that there's going to be no evolution of technology because of capitalism and desires and things like that, right? However, as we've already said, there are nations that have incentives, right? As we said already from our first speaker, and as I've also said in my previous speech, right? These countries must also have the political, must also need the political capital and support of their citizens, right? Therefore, these countries are likely to actually fund and actually support these research, right? Second of all, we simply say that capitalist desires will be simply be fulfilled, right? If these companies actually produce these products, right? Simply because the demand is so high, well, because simply if you do think they're an answer to the status quo and say and the future actually and say that it's so problematic, well then there's obviously going to be a lot of people who actually want that solution, right? Moreover, even if this was actually true, as our whip speaker said, there's simply no no analysis from their side that capitalism will even exist in the first place, right? Why will be maintained, especially when we realize the problem so much already, right? We simply cannot see how this is true. Okay, on the other hand, what have we said? So we've said that first of all, there's going to be incentive for these places, and that second of all, that we will actually have the capability to do so, right? And so we simply say that they offered us no actual engagement for this point, right? Moreover, we simply say that these developments are already happening, right? And we've already given various examples of how this was already occurring, and no engagements for them were made from the other side, right? And that is why we see that technological development will actually occur, right? And so the bottom line, we can at least help those with diseases or famine, right? Even if we say the climate change issue was a wash. Second of all, let's talk about the conflicts, right? We simply said that there'll be more conflicts in the future, right? However, we simply say that it's not true, right? Because they did not reconstruct at all on our engagements about it being not being indirect or not, or like countries will be incapable, whatever the desires be, and that also they simply did not say, most importantly, why this will happen in the time frame that we are talking about, right? It might end before the 100 years, and society might reconstruct itself from there. On the other hand, it might happen 500 years later, right? We simply say that they have given us no explanation of how this problem was actually going to occur in 100 years, right? Okay, so then let me compare our two stances, right? First of all, about relevance, right? The government's 2 points, well, they did explain how the situation was bad in the status quo, right? And the only layer of the mechanism that they had was that, this will continue. But they gave us no explanation, crucially, on how this is going to continue to occur, right? So, yeah, thank you for explaining the problem with the status quo. We're very thankful. But they simply failed to show us how the situation will continue on with the counterfactual, right? And therefore, we say that their points only support our argument because we have shown you how there will actually be a positive delta once this time transpires, right? Second of all, possibility. Our side's issues are clearly occurring, right? We can tell this A from past facts, for example, and B because it is already occurring under the status quo. And we believe that both these issues were never engaged on from their side of the house, therefore we win on this point. So now moving on to the conclusions, right? So will the problems of the status quo be existing, or will they be solved, right? So they say that there will be more people, and there will be these environmental problems, right? We believe that the point about there will be more people will simply be cut simply because they have never reconstructed our engagements, right? That there are already countries, even developing ones, that have their population decreasing, right? And also they also not engaged at all on our points about technological development, as I've already said. On the other hand, what have we said? We've said that because of this technological development, these problems do not exist, and because this mechanism was never fully repeated on, we simply say that there's no way that they could have won, and that we are so proud to oppose. And that is why that is where I will end my speech. Thank you.
I thank the opposition reply speaker for closing the case for their side of the House and call upon the government reply speaker to close the debate and indeed the competition as a whole. Hear, hear.
the near future are going to like panic and going to say like we need to act now because they're going to finally realize that people are going to die and humanity will go extinct, which means that if these people do not make the technology, then opposition is agreeing that people are going to die and the humanity will go extinct, right? Regarding this, now I want to talk about 3 points here. So first is, will these issues actually occur that we are talking about? And second, will innovation happen? And then I'm just going to weigh a bit. So first, will these issues occur? They said that we didn't mechanize how the population is going to increase, but they only talked about countries. There are a few countries where population is decreasing, but globally, if you look at it globally, population is increasing. The global trend is that it has been increasing for years, and they haven't shown why this increasing trend will magically stop. And they haven't. And what is this magical power? And these problems are not going to be solved on their own. Somebody has to do something about it. So we can say that these issues will still exist because problems don't solve themselves on its own. The majority of climate change will happen. They concede. They said that when they responded to our POI, they said that there wouldn't be we couldn't cut carbon emissions by half the rate by 2030. But scientists say that the impact will be irreversible if we don't make it to that year. So basically, even if we find some kind of technology, it is very unlikely that we are going to be able to mitigate or eliminate the impacts of climate change. And is war likely to happen? So, like they said that because we do not have a checking system, war breaks out. But this is untrue because we have the UN Security Council, but they weren't able to stop Russia invading Ukraine. They say that nukes are not likely to be used. But if this war still goes on, and Russia is at the brink of losing, they will rely on nukes as the last resort because they cannot lose. They cannot afford to lose. And North Korea has been shooting missiles more and more every year, it is completely possible that nuclear weapons will be used in the future. So will innovation happen? So this is basically what opposition relies on. Innovation will happen, and it will be able to save the world. However, the technology to deal with that is not guaranteed. Even if technology is created, how will it become accessible to all countries? How is it going to benefit everyone? How the cost will be expensive, first of all, and to manufacture these things. Even scientists cannot be able to achieve in the time frame of 100 years. So their whole case relies on the might, on hope. That there's going to be, we will be lucky. We will find a cure to a disease. We will come across a star that has energy, and we magically will have the energy to use that the knowledge to use that energy that we find. And they talked about how people will start acting, but why aren't they acting in the first place right now? Because they know that there's a crisis right now. And even if they realize that we're under a crisis, in 10 years' time, it will be too late to reverse all the impacts that humanity has caused now and in the future. So magnitude, we win on magnitude because the majority are not going to be able to benefit from that technology, which we don't even know will exist, because it's going to be expensive and we do not know if we'll be able to manufacture that a lot or not. And also the probability on our side is definite, however it is unlikely or at least a little probable that it will happen. And time frame, we win on time frame because in 100 years these impacts will be there. But in the long term, their innovation will only be able to have power in the long term because 100 years is not enough to develop all of that technology into usage. That is why we are so proud to propose. Thank you.
I thank the reply speaker and a round of applause for our panel finalists in general. Well done, everyone. Needless to say, this is a close out, but you'll find out the result pretty soon. Thank you for joining us.